fellow Ishies, it's time for episode 9 of Death of a Powerhouse. So things are getting a little bit weird for Owen. Well, they're going to get weirder. It's raining and gloomy outside. I've got a new haircut that I hate, so I thought it would be the perfect time to read this to you. Let's get into it. This episode is The Eyes. The trouble with spending months investigating powerful people is that eventually you begin attracting the attention of individuals who would very much prefer you find a new hobby. Gardening, perhaps, bird watching, competitive cheese carving, anything other than asking questions that they find inconvenient. The weeks following my broadcast became increasingly unpleasant. Not dramatic enough for a Hollywood film, unfortunately. Nobody rappelled through my windows. Nobody chased me through abandoned warehouses. Instead, I encountered something far more modern. Professional humbuggery. Articles appeared describing me as unstable. Broadcasters who had ignored the story for months suddenly became experts on why nobody should pay attention to it. Every popinjay with a microphone discovered a passionate commitment to protecting the reputations of people they had never previously mentioned. One evening, Jake Fife devoted nearly 40 minutes to explaining why my investigation was irresponsible. The performance was remarkable, not because it was persuasive. Jake treated every question about Velkrain as though it were a live grenade that had accidentally rolled into the studio. Rather than examine it, he spent 40 minutes insisting nobody should be concerned about explosives. In fairness, this is not the reaction one typically expects from a man convinced there is no danger. I remain impressed by the achievement. Griff appeared immediately afterwards to clarify matters. Jake blundered. Griff polished. Jake stumbled into a ditch. Griff explained the ditch was actually a feature. The arrangement had become so predictable that listeners were beginning to send me bingo cards. Meanwhile, the source inside Veritas Meridian continued supplying fragments from Charlene's records. One package arrived anonymously at the station. No return address, no note, just copies, contracts, travel records, meeting schedules, the sort of material capable of curing insomnia within minutes. Then I found something unusual, a flight manifest. Several executives connected to Velkrain had attended a private conference 18 months before Charlene's death. Eric attended. Griff attended. Several government advisors attended. A handful of names from Charlene's insurance folder appeared as well. The conference itself was described as an environmental summit. That sounded wonderfully respectable. Unfortunately, the attendee list suggested otherwise. Charlene had written a single word across the top, Fandangle. I laughed. Then I kept reading. The conference occurred near a mining region associated with several of the strategic mineral contracts Charlene had been investigating. Publicly, participants discussed sustainability, development, and international cooperation. Privately, large sums of money began moving shortly afterward. Perhaps coincidence, perhaps not. What caught my attention, however, was something else entirely. The photographs. Most conference photographs were perfectly ordinary. Executives shaking hands, politicians smiling, consultants pretending PowerPoint presentations mattered, the usual. Then I noticed Charlene had circled one image. No explanation, no notes. Just a red circle around Griff. At first, I assumed she was highlighting him because she knew him personally. Then I noticed who stood beside him. A man named Velkrain. Velkrain was a person's name? The discovery surprised me. Until then, I had assumed Velkrain referred only to the tiny country or their corporations that appeared throughout Charlene's files. Apparently not. The man appeared in photographs stretching back nearly 20 years. always present, always near the center, rarely mentioned. Charlene had written beside one photograph, "Why is nobody curious about him?" An excellent question. One I immediately began researching. Unfortunately, researching Velkrain proved unusually difficult. Records existed, yet somehow revealed nothing. Biographies contradicted one another, corporate history shifted, photographs disappeared, archived interviews vanished. The entire situation possessed a distinctly fremd quality. Not impossible, not supernatural. Simply wrong in a way that was difficult to articulate. The source and I discussed the problem several days later. "Nobody knows much about him," he said. "That's strange." The source nodded. "That's exactly what Charlene thought." Then he handed me something that genuinely surprised me. A transcript. Not from a meeting or a business negotiation, from a private conversation Charlene had recorded in her notes. Apparently, she had spoken with a consultant who had attended the conference. Most of the discussion concerned contracts and political influence. Then came a section she had underlined twice. Charlene. Who exactly is Velkrain? Consultant. Depends on who you ask. Charlene. I'm asking you. There was a long pause. Then, consultant. Officially? Even reading the transcript, I could almost hear Charlene's frustration. Officially. One of humanity's most irritating words. Charlene pressed further. The consultant eventually laughed and changed the subject. That bothered her enough to note it. It bothered me enough to keep reading. The final pages contained observations from the months before her death. Most involved financial relationships. Several involved media coordination. Then one note appeared that felt entirely different. Not because of what it said, because Charlene had crossed it out, hard, repeatedly, as though she regretted writing it. The words remained barely visible. I spent nearly an hour enlarging the image before I could read them. What I found was absurd, utterly absurd. The kind of thing normally found on late-night radio between advertisements for miracle supplements and emergency food buckets. The note read, "Eyes looked black for a second." That was it. No names, no explanation, no context, just one sentence. And I stared at it. Then I laughed, then stared at it again. Charlene had spent months documenting financial corruption, media influence, strategic minerals, and political relationships. This did not belong. It felt Pickwickian. A joke, a half-finished thought. The sort of thing a person writes after a long day and later regrets. I nearly discarded it. Then I noticed something else. Several pages later, buried among the notes about conference attendees, Charlene had written another observation. This one had not been crossed out. Everyone acts like they don't see it. Now that was interesting, not because I believed the claim, because Charlene apparently did. And Charlene was not a mooncalf. Nor was she prone to apanthropy, paranoia, or imaginative flights of fancy. If something unsettled her, there was usually a reason. Whether the reason itself made sense was another matter entirely. A week later, I mentioned the notes during my broadcast, mostly as a joke, a bit of Carriantism to light the mood. I told listeners that if the investigation continued much longer, I fully expected someone to inform me that the president was secretly a lizard operative overseeing an international mineral empire. The audience laughed, I laughed, even Jake laughed. For several days, the clip circulated online. Then something peculiar happened. The clip disappeared. Not everywhere, just from several places where it had previously gained traction. Videos vanished, posts vanished, comments vanished. Nothing obvious, just enough to notice. When I mentioned this during the following broadcast, a longtime listener sent me a message. Charlene wasn't joking about the eyes. I read the message twice, 3 times. For the first time in months, I found myself hoping the sender was mistaken. Because money laundering, I understood. Political corruption, I understood. Media manipulation, I understood. But if Charlene's strangest notes were pointing towards something else entirely, then I was no longer certain what kind of story I had been investigating. Okay, so what are you thinking now? Does any of that sound familiar? I don't know. I think I might be onto something if you listen to certain podcasters. But just maybe 1 or 2 episodes left and we will find out who killed Charlene. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. See you next time.